I'm so upset. Oh my God.
Let's see how Earth responds to that.
Welcome to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and we have a fantastic show ahead for you all today. In fact, we're going to talk about what the fate of H-1B visas will be under Donald Trump. We'll even explore whether Donald Trump is fully aware of what H-1B visas are. I'm not even kidding. Later in the show, we'll also talk a little bit about the fallout following Donald Trump's decision to do sweeping pardons of January 6 rioters. While some might have been victims of a heavy-handed justice system, others were caught on tape literally assaulting police officers. And there are some on the right who are upset by the pardons applying to those individuals. So we'll tell you who those people are and what the fallout is. In the second hour, John Iadarola will be joining us to cover a whole host of other topics, including Donald Trump's announcements in regard to building AI infrastructure here in the United States. And we'll also talk a little bit about what Trump has in store for the war in Ukraine, what plan he has in trying to make that war come to an end. Lots to get to in the show today. As always, just want to encourage you all to like and share the stream if you haven't done so already. And if you're watching us live, we're going to have poll questions associated with every story we cover. I'll check in with how the polls are doing and we'll engage. We really want to hear what you think about the stories that we're covering as well. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Any regrets?
No, I don't, because we did the right thing. We were there to protect Trump supporters from Antifa. We were there to protect and secure 2 permitted events on Capitol grounds where members of Congress were going to speak. The guys that went inside did not commit any crimes. In fact, they helped people. They helped the police and helped the people out.
He says he has no regrets. What do you say, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I would say to Stuart Rhodes. Go yourself.
Wow. Well, incredibly strong words from former Capitol Police officer Michael Fanone following President Donald Trump's decision to offer sweeping pardons to nearly every January 6 rioter who had been charged with crimes related to that day or even convicted of crimes related to that day. Now, of course, the big controversy here is the fact that these sweeping pardons also apply to individuals who had carried out assaults on police officers on January 6th. And Fanone was among those police officers. He was assaulted on that day, but he isn't the only one who's furious about this. So yesterday, the largest police union in the United States took some time to condemn Donald Trump's decision to pardon all January 6 defendants despite endorsing him in the presidential campaign. And I want to be clear, Donald Trump does have the backing of law enforcement agencies and of the police unions. This is definitely one of the police unions that we're talking about here that backed Donald Trump, but they felt the need to speak out against his decision to pardon the violent offenders on January 6th. And I commend them for doing so because I also agree that pardoning individuals who carried out acts of violence sends a bad message. And if we're against criminal coddlers on the left, and certainly the right wing loves to speak out against that, they should be against criminal coddling on the right as well. So let's get to the statement offered by the Fraternal Order of Police and the International Association of Chiefs of Police. They say that the IACP and FOP are deeply discouraged by the recent pardons and commutations granted by both the Biden and Trump administrations to individuals convicted of killing or assaulting law enforcement officers. The IACP and FOP firmly believe that those convicted of such crimes should serve their full sentences. I'm not really understanding what they're referring to in regard to Biden pardoning people who assaulted police officers, because Biden didn't do that. Biden did pardon members of his own family preemptively. We spoke out against that. We think that that sets a horrible precedent. He pardoned his son, Hunter Biden, when he had been on the record multiple times promising that he would not do so. So if they want to condemn him for that, that's totally fine, and I agree. But in regard to pardoning individuals who assaulted police officers, Donald Trump did that. More on that though, they say in the rest of their statement, when perpetrators of crimes, especially serious crimes, are not held fully accountable, it sends a dangerous message that the consequences of attacking law enforcement are not severe, potentially emboldening others to commit similar acts of violence. The IACP and FOP call on policymakers, judicial authorities, and community leaders to ensure that justice is upheld by enforcing full sentences, especially in cases involving violence against law enforcement. Now, on a local level, what conservatives point to in regard to soft on crime treatment toward individuals who assault police officers, they're usually talking about what happened during some of the riots that broke out during the BLM protests. But if there was soft on crime treatment toward those individuals, that was on a local and state level, not on a federal level. So maybe that's what they were referring to when they referenced Joe Biden. But again, what really spurred this statement and this reaction from the largest police union in the United States was the fact that Donald Trump decided to do these sweeping pardons rather than offer pardons on a case-by-case basis. That was what Trump had promised to do leading up to the election, and he didn't follow through on that. He just did the sweeping pardons. Now, about 140 officers, police officers from the US Capitol Police and DC Metropolitan Police were injured on January 6th, and the attack has been linked to people dying as a result. Now, we're also learning some pretty damning new details about why it is that Donald Trump decided to carry out sweeping pardons as opposed to pardons on a case-by-case basis. So President Trump's sweeping pardons for 1,500 January 6 criminals and defendants were a last-minute rip the bandage off decision to try to move past the issue quickly. White House advisors familiar with the Trump team's discussions tell Axios. So apparently 8 days before Inauguration Day, JD Vance went on Fox News and said that January 6th, people who have been convicted of crimes on January 6th, who assaulted police officers, obviously should not be pardoned. Originally, Trump's team actually did set out to do pardons on a case-by-case basis, just review each case and decide whether or not an individual deserves a pardon. But according to Axios, that process was considered onerous and time was running out heading into Inauguration Day. Trump wanted to pardon as many people as possible and get it over with. So he landed on clemency for everyone. Trump just said, F it. Release them all, an advisor familiar with the discussion said. So because he wanted to be seen making a bold statement on day one of his presidency, day one in office, he decided to skip over individual cases and just issue a blanket pardon. And naturally, many of Donald Trump's diehard allies and supporters are absolutely thrilled about this. Some Republican lawmakers are also defending Donald Trump's decision without quite endorsing it. Take a look.
The president has the pardon and commutation authority. It's his decision, and I think what was made clear all along is that peaceful protests and people who engage in that should never be punished. The president's made his decision. I don't second guess those, and yes, it's kind of my ethos, my worldview. We believe in redemption. We believe in second chances. If you would argue that those people didn't pay a heavy penalty, having been incarcerated and all of that, that's up to you. But the president's made a decision. We move forward. There are better days ahead of us. That's what we're excited about. We're not looking backwards, we're looking forward.
Well, I said what I just said before, and that is we're not looking backwards, we're looking forward.
Leaders, do you have any concerns with Trump pardoning the January 6th prisoners, including the ones who attacked police?
Look, he talked about that during the campaign. Joe Biden said he wouldn't pardon a lot of the people that he did pardon yesterday. President Trump's a man of his word. He's going to follow through on his commitments.
Do you have concerns about it at all?
Well, if you look at what we're focused on, obviously today, our meeting was focused on getting our economy back on track.
Do you agree with President Trump's decision to pardon these violent people and releasing them from jail? If they were truly violent, no, but do I know that they were? I don't know that.
What do you mean you don't know that?
We're
showing the footage on the air right now.
Bro, they're on camera. The B-roll is on air as you are denying that. That was amazing. That last clip in the compilation was amazing. But I want to just quickly go back to Speaker Mike Johnson saying, we're looking forward. We're looking forward. We just want to move on. That's an interesting case to make, especially since Mike Johnson just announced that he's forming a new congressional committee to investigate January 6th and debunk any false narratives. Can we just move on? I get that our politicians are hyper-focused on performative politics, theater, rather than actually legislating, passing laws that need to be passed, dealing with reforms that need to happen. But the idea that they're moving forward, when in reality, they're creating a brand new congressional committee to investigate January 6th, just this time on the right-wing side, is insane to me. One clarification I want to make, there is a possibility that the police union, in referencing Biden, was specifically referencing the fact that he commuted the sentence of Leonard Peltier, who was imprisoned for killing 2 FBI agents back in the 1970s. He had been in prison since then. He's in his 80s now, and Biden decided to commute his sentence. I'm guessing maybe that's who they were referring to, but I wanted to quickly make that clarification in case that is what they were saying. But let's move on to other Republicans who are actually condemning Donald Trump's move in pardoning the violent offenders associated with January 6th. Let's take a look.
I do not support the pardons if they were given to people who committed violent crimes.
I've got concerns with any pardons for people who did harm to a police officer, full stop. And I've also got serious concerns with all of the pardons by President Biden.
I'm uncomfortable with all of it.
Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, who told me, I am a big back the blue guy. I think people who assault police officers, if they do the crime, they should do the time.
I mean, I agree with those lawmakers. And by the way, I would agree with any lawmakers who release statements like that in regard to a Democratic president who has pardoned or commuted the sentences of individuals on the left who assaulted police officers. We have to draw a clear distinction between violent criminals and those who might have broken the law but didn't engage in violent acts. I think there is a distinction there that's really important to focus on. And it seems the majority of Americans actually agree with the dissenting Republicans, because a Reuters Ipsos poll that closed on Tuesday found that 58% of respondents felt that Trump should not have pardoned those convicted of crimes for January 6th. Another poll from before Donald Trump took office yielded very similar results. Let's take a look at this. This is a graph put together by NPR, and this poll conducted earlier this month found that 62% of Americans disapproved of Trump pardoning people involved in the January 6th insurrection, 89% of Democrats and 62% of independents, and even 30% of Republicans disapproved of the pardons. Nonetheless, Trump continued to defend his decision when pressed about it last night. Take a look.
You would agree that it's never acceptable to assault a police officer,
Sure.
right? So then if I can, among those you pardoned, DJ Rodriguez, he drove a stun gun into the neck of a DC police officer who was abducted by the mob that day. He later confessed on video to the FBI and pleaded guilty for his crimes. Why does he deserve a pardon?
Well, I don't know. Was it a pardon? Because we're looking at commutes and we're looking at pardons. Okay, well, we'll take a look at everything. But I can say this, murderers today are not even charged. You have murderers that aren't charged all over. You take a look at what's gone on in Philadelphia, take a look at what's gone on in LA, where people murder people and they don't get charged. These people have already served years in prison, and they've served them viciously. It's a disgusting prison. It's been horrible. It's inhumane. It's been a terrible, terrible thing.
I want them all to be in prison. I don't want to, like, it's ridiculous to look at pardons or soft on crime treatment from members of the right in order to justify soft on crime treatment by members of the left. How about it's all bad? How about people who pose a threat, a public safety threat to society, should probably be locked up, should probably face the full consequences of the acts that they engaged in. So look, for me, that's the clear distinction. I'm not one of these people who wants to imprison nonviolent offenders for the rest of their lives for nonviolent offenses. And that includes people who might have walked into the Capitol building following, those rushing into it and breaking in. If someone has carried out acts of violence, there needs to be a clear message sent to them and to society at large that it's unacceptable. And so pointing to soft on crime treatment in some of the liberal run cities across the country doesn't justify, in my opinion, what Donald Trump did in issuing these sweeping pardons of individuals who carried out acts of violence against police officers on January 6th. That's my view on it. Obviously, the majority of Americans, based on the polling, also agree with me. And I'm really happy to see that, because I don't think it's healthy to have the type of culture that justifies violence as long as it's carried out by your preferred political group. Anyway, let's move on to one more story before we take a break, because I wanted to talk about the latest in regard to H-1B visas. As you guys can recall, that led to a pretty fierce debate among MAGA. And I want to talk about what Trump has to say about it now.
We want competent people coming into our country. And HB1, I know the program very well. I use the program. Maitre d's, wine, experts, even waiters, high quality waiters. You got to get the best people.
I mean, what would America do when we need high quality waiters and we don't have something like the H-1B visa program? Okay, look, President Donald Trump has come out yet again to declare his support, his love for the H-1B visa program, which he claims to know a lot about. But that clip you just watched proves otherwise. And that's a problem when he's the guy who just won the presidential election in large part due to his stance on immigration. Lately, H-1B visas, or the Skilled Foreign Worker Program, has sparked a massive debate between Trump's billionaire tech bro donors and the populist wing of the MAGA movement. The America First MAGA crowd rightly wants to protect American jobs for American workers, and they've noticed that these visa programs are being abused to their detriment. On the other hand, tech bros like Elon Musk not only rely on H-1B visas, they're willing to go to war with MAGA to maintain or even expand the program. Now, originally H-1B visas were designed to alleviate labor shortages in scientific and technological fields by, bringing over foreigners of distinguished merit and ability. The skilled worker program that offers H-1B visas currently has a cap of $65,000 per year, a number that technology companies have pushed to increase. Elon Musk is known to use the program at his companies. In fact, Tesla has obtained 724 H-1B visas in 2024. Now, Trump, on the other hand, mostly uses H-2B and H-2A visas for his businesses, not H-1B visas. H-2B visas are for non-agricultural unskilled labor, all the jobs that he kind of lists there, with the exception of sommeliers, and H-2A visas pertain to agricultural workers. Now, according to Labor Department data, from 2003 to 2017, Trump's companies were approved for more than 1,000 H-2B visas for jobs like cooks, housekeepers, and waiters at his properties, including Mar-a-Lago and Palm Beach, Florida, and the Trump National Golf Club in Jupiter, Florida. In each instance, his companies had to attest that there were no American citizens who could perform those jobs. Let's pause for laughter, because that's ridiculous. Now, the president also benefits from foreign labor that legally enters the country and works in the country with H-2B visas. Currently, Trump's winery in Charlottesville, Virginia, is seeking 31 foreign vineyard workers, farm workers specifically, under the H-2A program, offering them $15.81 per hour. So look, Trump probably should have a better grasp of the different foreign worker programs before offering his defense of H-1Bs. But Trump seems to keep making the same mistake. In fact, not too long ago, when this whole H-1B visa debate began, he took Elon Musk's side in touting the visas, telling reporters that I have many H-1B visas on my properties. I've been a believer in H-1B. I have used it many times. It's a great program. But is it a great program? Like, we've already determined that he's mixing up the H-1, the visa programs. He's not using H-1B, we know that. But is the H-1B program a great program? Look, I think it could be if reformed to close certain loopholes that actually do harm American workers. Because even though H-1Bs have some safeguards allegedly to protect American workers, corporate executives have found the loopholes and they are using them to their advantage. Research from the Economic Policy Institute found that major employers, especially those in Silicon Valley, are using H-1B and similar visa programs to depress wages. Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Apple, and Meta used the scheme in order to legally pay many of their H-1B workers below the local median wage for the jobs they fill. Just how much are we talking about here? How much are they depressing wages? Well, there have been some studies in that as well. And economists from the University of Michigan and the University of California, San Diego found that tech worker wages would have been as much as 5.1% higher in the absence of H-1B visa workers in the same field. Reporter Li Fong detailed specific companies and how they abuse the system in a piece that he wrote for Unheard, writing that Meta, for instance, is classified H-1B dependent over its unusually high foreign visa workforce. The government found that Meta discriminated against American workers, refusing to recruit, consider, or hire qualified Americans for more than 2,600 jobs. The Department of Justice, however, ended the issue with a slap on the wrist penalty of $14.25 million, or a mere 0.016% of company revenue. Meta is far from the only company caught doing this, by the way. In October, a jury found that Cognizant engaged in systemic discrimination against American workers in favor of thousands of South Asian workers on H-1B visas. The trial unearthed damaging facts about the system, namely that Cognizant gamed the visa lottery process with fake applications and sought to depress wages with visa-dependent foreign talent. A former director of that very firm said that the entire business model is built on the back of cheap Indian labor. The people who are on visas are the people Cognizant wants. While these problems absolutely do need to be addressed, I also believe that it would be a misguided overcorrection to entirely get rid of the H-1B visa program, because it turns out that America currently is suffering from shortages of labor in several professions. So let's talk a little bit about that. First, let's watch this.
Entire fields like nursing, teaching, and construction can't find enough workers. Let's break it down by field. The American Health Association reports 600,000 nurses plan to leave the field by 2027. Data from the National Center for Educational Statistics says the average public school has 2 vacant teaching positions, and that 4% of all public school teaching positions across the country were empty. Even the construction industry will need another 540,000 workers on top of the normal pace of hiring to meet the demand for labor, according to the Associated Builders and Contractors. More and more, these professions are turning to apprenticeship programs to help fill the gaps created by labor shortfalls. And with what experts are calling a manufacturing supercycle on the horizon, the US economy is quickly approaching a make or break moment.
Not very many high school students think about a career in the trades.
Labor shortages in the healthcare industry are particularly concerning. There's already a shortage of registered nurses, and it's about to get worse due to the fact that many nurses are set for retirement soon. According to the Health Resources and Services Administration, nationally, there is a projected shortage of 78,610 full-time equivalent RNs, registered nurses, in 2025. The 10 states with the largest projected shortage in 2035 are Washington at 26%, Georgia at 21%, California 18%, Oregon 16%, Michigan and Idaho both at 15%, Louisiana and North Carolina both at 13%, followed by New Jersey at 12% and South Carolina at 11%. So while the H-1B visa program is definitely being abused and is in desperate need of reforms, any changes made by Trump might be misguided, especially if he has no idea who the visas apply to, what they do, or which programs he himself benefits from for his own businesses. So something to keep an eye on. I think that this debate within the right wing of our political spectrum is a really interesting debate to focus on, because it does show that tension, that conflict between the donor class and the actual voters. The voters see the problems that come along with this system that has loopholes that are being abused by these tech billionaires. But at the same time, these tech billionaires are the very individuals who are heavily funding Donald Trump's campaign. They heavily funded his inauguration. They were very much present on Inauguration Day, having the best seats at the House. And so I'm very curious to see what the reaction will be from the MAGA base that is very much against the abuses of these H-1B visa programs, right? So we'll see how this all plays out, but I'm getting a sense that they're getting a taste of what Democratic voters have been dealing with for multiple election cycles in a row now. The donors want things that conflict with what Democratic voters want. And so once these Democrats get elected, they break their promises to their voters in order to serve their donors. And that has really hurt Democrats electorally. I think that the same thing could happen with Republicans if they continue allowing the corruption to guide their policy. Donald Trump went from being pretty hard on immigration, wanting to not just rein in illegal immigration, but rein in forms of legal immigration as well. And now all of a sudden you're hearing him celebrate H-1B visas, even going so far as to claiming that he himself has benefited from it when he hasn't. He uses a different set of visa programs for his own businesses. So we'll see how it plays out. I think it's an interesting debate. I think that those who are concerned about the abuses are making good points. But I don't want to get rid of the program altogether, especially when you consider the fact that we do have labor shortages here in the US. All right, well, tell me what you think in the comments section. I love to hear from you all. For now, though, we're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, lots more to get to, including how Donald Trump intends to end the war in Ukraine by really pressuring Vladimir Putin. We'll talk about what that pressure is and more when we come back.
You're the president of the United States. You can declassify just by saying it's declassified, even by thinking about it.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to our first social break of the day. Rage Rock for Now says Trump seriously pardoned approximately 1,500 people that fast. Who would have conceivably reviewed each case? Surely JD Vance knew case-by-case reviews weren't going to happen. So much for credibility. So I don't think you necessarily have to review every individual case. What I would have done if I were in their shoes is, okay, people who were charged or convicted of nonviolent things like trespassing, they get a pardon. But there weren't that many people who had been charged with violent acts or violent crimes. those were the people who should have been reviewed case by case. But obviously that didn't happen. They got a pardon as well. Cliff Campen writes in and says, Donnie didn't want to look at all that paperwork, vintage Trump. Well, I mean, that's why you delegate. That's what the president typically does. I don't think that he was gonna sit there and review each case one by one himself, but it doesn't seem like there was any review one by one. There's just an effort to pardon it and be done with it and move on. And look, honestly, in reality, what do I think is gonna happen? We're all gonna forget about this. Like next week, we're gonna be talking about something entirely different. By the time the next election rolls around, by the time the midterms are here, I highly doubt that this is going to politically impact anyone on the right. So that was probably the calculation here, but I do think that it's a bad look when you say you stand with police and then proceed to pardon the very people who assaulted police on January 6th. All right, let's go to Rage Rock for now, who says, I'm actually amazed Trump bothers addressing reporters this much. I'm not at all. And in fact, I think that helps him optically to some extent, especially when you juxtapose his transparency and his willingness to speak with reporters to that of Biden's. I mean, Biden was hiding, like he did not want to address reporters, and that was a very bad look. The rest of the comment is, then again, I suppose it hints at what a troll and attention hog he is, despite shooting from the hip with happenstance regarding facts. Well, he does do that with facts for sure, but I will say this, I would rather have the president speak to reporters more often than not. And so even if he's saying things we disagree with, even if he's saying things that aren't true, it's better to get an understanding of what the president is thinking as opposed to being left in the dark about where the president is, what he's thinking, how he's governing. And I think we had a lot of that under the Biden administration, and it did not help the Democratic Party. All right, let's get back to the show. See you there. Welcome back to TYT. As some of you might have noticed, we have poll questions related to every story that we cover because we want to know where your hearts and minds are at. So when it comes to the first story we covered today in regard to Donald Trump pardoning the January 6th rioters, including those who committed acts of violence against police officers, we wanted to know, do you think that Trump will actually lose support from voters in law enforcement specifically over his January 6 pardons? Let's look at Twitch, where 37% of our viewers said yes, and 63% said no. I would agree with those who say no. I don't think that Trump is gonna lose support over his decision here. In our YouTube audience, we had very similar results. 38% say yes, he will lose some support among law enforcement for his decision to pardon January 6 rioters. 62% say no. And when it comes to the second story, H-1B visas, what should the fate of H-1B visas be? A, get rid of them. B, leave them alone, or C, reform the program. Well, 16% of our audience want to get rid of them. 20% say leave them alone, and I think I made a really good argument here because a whopping 65% of our audience say keep the program, but it needs reforms. So I love hearing from you guys. Thank you for participating in our polls. Please continue doing so. I really like knowing what you guys think about these stories as well. Now, with that in mind, let's get to some foreign policy and how Donald Trump intends to end the war in Ukraine. This morning, President Donald Trump sent out a Truth Social post to Vladimir Putin, demanding that he make a deal to end the war in Ukraine, or else. Now, the or else, according to Donald Trump, would be taxes, tariffs, and sanctions on Russia. So it's worth reading exactly what Trump wrote on Truth Social to kind of get a better understanding of how he is approaching this issue. Because remember, one of his big promises was that he was gonna end the war in Ukraine on day one. Now, obviously that didn't happen on day one. Obviously, after he made that statement, he just kind of backtracked a little bit to lower expectations, which I think was the right thing to do. There's no way you're gonna end a big war like this on day one. But nonetheless, this is what he posted on Truth Social, saying that I'm not looking to hurt Russia. I love the Russian people and always had a very good relationship with President Putin. And this, despite the radical left's Russia, Russia, Russia hoax. We must never forget that Russia helped us win the Second World War, losing almost 60 million lives in the process. Okay, Soviet era Russia absolutely did help beat the Nazis. I mean, they played a pivotal role in beating the Nazis, so he's right about that. But we'll take a moment to note that we're not sure where he got that 60 million figure from, because according to the National World War II Museum, the Soviet Union lost 24 million soldiers and civilians in World War II. Whatever, that's just a side note, but let's get to the rest of his statement. He says, all of that being said, I'm going to do Russia, whose economy is failing, and President Putin a very big favor. Settle now and stop this ridiculous war. It's only going to get worse. If we don't make a deal, and soon, I have no other choice but to put high levels of taxes, tariffs, and sanctions on anything being sold by Russia to the United States and various other participating countries. Let's get this war, which never would have started if I were president, over with. We can do it the easy way or the hard way. And the easy way is always better. It's time to make a deal. No more lives should be lost. So obviously the Biden administration has already implemented economic sanctions against Russia for their role in invading Ukraine. We're gonna revisit that and kind of compare that to what Trump is suggesting here. But this messaging is interesting because obviously the media's coverage of Donald Trump and his relationship with Vladimir Putin has been pretty critical. He's been very friendly to Putin, and so obviously that led to allegations that Russia might have colluded with Donald Trump to help him win the 2016 presidential election. There hasn't been any, evidence of that. But lately, Trump's tone has changed a little bit. For instance, yesterday he stated that Putin should make a deal. I think he's destroying Russia by not making a deal. And he also said he can't be thrilled. He's not doing so well. I mean, he's grinding it out. It's not making him look very good. I think he would be well off to end that war. So look, the good news is Trump is very clearly motivated to end this war, and he is issuing threats against Vladimir Putin, and I think that's the right person to issue threats against. Yesterday, Trump also said that he believes Volodymyr Zelensky is more open to making a deal, but he doesn't think or doesn't know whether Vladimir Putin is. When Trump was inaugurated, Putin stated that he was open to dialogue with the United States about the war, saying that I want to emphasize that its goal should not be a brief truce, but a lasting peace based on respect for the legitimate interests of all people, which is rich coming from the guy who invaded Ukraine. But Trump has infamously claimed that he could end the Ukraine-Russia war in 24 hours. He has already missed that deadline, but he has admitted that a deal will take a little bit of time. Let's take a look at that.
The real conversations will start on the 20th, but we had a really good conversation, and I think we're going to be in a good place in the Middle East. I think the Middle East will be in a good place. I think actually more difficult is going to be the Russia-Ukraine situation. I see that as more difficult.
When you say
I don't think they should have allowed missiles to be shot 200 miles into Russia. I think that was a bad thing. And that brought the Koreans in, North Korea.
It does seem that Trump wants to get a deal, get a deal through as quickly as possible, so that's good news. But it's worth noting that Trump is pushing for peace because he's responding to the will of his base, his voters. His voters no longer want to fund the war in Ukraine. They no longer want to have any US involvement in that conflict, and they want it to end. And so he made that promise to his voters, and it's clear that he intends on keeping that promise. Now, whether or not his strategy here is gonna work remains to be seen, but I do want to just show you this clip from last year because I think it's still relevant today. Take a look at this.
The young men that I have been talking to in particular, they don't hate Kamala Harris. They actually like her in certain ways. They just say they think the world was better and safer under Donald Trump. The economy was healthier. One other thing that keeps coming up too, that you don't hear a lot about in the national media, Dana, is a lot of young men are worried about global conflict because they are of draft age. That comes up over and over and over again in conversations that I've been having over the last few weeks.
I thought that insight from Peter Hamby was so valuable. That conversation took place during the election cycle, and I really wish Democrats listened, but they didn't. Donald Trump, on the other hand, has been listening to his supporters. And when he says he's gonna carry out a promise, sometimes he doesn't follow through. But in this case, to me, it's clear that he does want to follow through. Biden had not spoken to Vladimir Putin, I mean, in almost 3 years when he left office. And you need to have those difficult conversations and find a way to forge peace negotiations, peace deals in order to end that war. Meanwhile, as Ryan Grimm very effectively argued last year, Democrats suffered in the election because they had the optics of caring more about foreign wars than Americans here at home.
People see America first. They read it as xenophobic and anti-immigrant, but Trump's supporters scan it as a promise not to waste money on wars and nation building while our own country crumbles. But the critique in that slogan, and expressed by that Charlemagne caller, makes an emotional link between issues that are treated as disparate and distinct by political operatives. The jarring price swings at the grocery store and at the pump, combined with the out-of-control wars and the surge of migrants at the border, combined to produce a visceral sense that our leaders in Washington were sacrificing the needs of regular people here in the United States. People's sense that the economy was being handled poorly by Biden was colored by the chaos overseas, and his rapt attention to Ukraine and Israel left little room for confidence that he cared what was going on back here. By pretending that the US could do it all, but then only delivering on the foreign wars, Democrats set up ordinary people to view it as a zero-sum competition.
I think that statement from Ryan Grimm is so on point, and I do think that this hurt Democrats in this past election cycle. Look, say what you will about Donald Trump, and obviously we've been critical of him. Obviously I have my problems with him, but he tends to understand where the hearts and minds of his voters are far better than the Democrats do when it comes to their own voters. And they need to wake up to that fact, because if they don't, they're gonna keep losing elections. But nonetheless, just checking in on this devastating war in Ukraine. I mean, thousands of people have been killed as a result of this war. It needs to end. I don't care if it's the Democrats who succeed in ending it or the Republicans who succeed in ending it, it needs to end. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in December said that 43,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed in action, and an additional 370,000 have been wounded. Zelensky also said Ukraine estimated that 198,000 Russian soldiers have been killed and more than 550,000 have been wounded. Now, circling back to Donald Trump's threat to Vladimir Putin, which came in the form of additional tariffs and sanctions. As I mentioned earlier, yes, it is true that Biden has implemented sanctions against Russia, and they haven't worked. Russia has continued on with this war in Ukraine with no end in sight. However, there is one area in which Trump seems to be threatening Putin where Biden was kind of unwilling to do so. So this might make the difference. I don't know for sure, but here's what it's about. So the Trump administration seems more willing to go after Russia's energy sector, which the Biden administration also did to some extent, but in a very limited manner. During the confirmation hearing to be Trump's Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent last week told Congress that he would be 100% on board for taking sanctions up, especially on the Russian oil majors, to levels that would bring the Russian Federation to the table. Now, while Russia has thus far been able to basically circumvent Western sanctions, Business Insider reports that Russia's economy is in fact starting to slow, with inflation rising rapidly in the country. Only time will tell whether Trump will both make good on these threats and if these economic threats move the needle in regard to where Vladimir Putin stands on the continuation of this war in Ukraine. So we'll see if this is a tactic that works. But I'm glad that Trump at least realizes that ending a war doesn't happen in 24 hours. It's a complicated situation and you do need both parties to agree to it. And I'm also happy that he's realized that Putin is a lot more difficult to work with than Zelensky is on this matter. So we'll see how it plays out. We'll definitely follow the story. This war absolutely needs to end and I hope it does. For now, let's take a break. We'll be back with more news, including congressional Republicans threatening to have all sorts of strings attached to relief aid for Californians who just lost everything in devastating wildfires. Come right back.
Russia, Russia, Russia.
I love how inspiring this comment is, so I'm gonna read it first. This comes from Diego Shometz, who says, yesterday evening I was sworn in on the Open Government Commission for my city council. TYT and especially you, Anna, inspired me to get involved and make my emotions matter and productive. Thank you. Look, you guys can have a lot of influence in local politics, okay? A lot of people are not as involved or engaged in local politics, and if you are looking at your immediate surroundings, the conditions within your neighborhoods or your city, and you wanna make a change, get involved. You can get involved with your neighborhood council, city council, you can volunteer. Let's say one of the things, like for me, one of the things that really bothers me in Los Angeles right now is there's just trash everywhere. And so I kind of took matters in my own hands. If the trash bothers me, then I'm gonna pick it up. So whenever I walk my dog, I go with one of those like, trash pickup sticks with the clamps at the end, like my little trash bag, and it feels good. It feels like I'm giving back to my community. So that's a small way that you can get involved, but I love hearing that, Diego is getting involved politically by getting involved with the city council. Moondragon says, spent Monday in Alberta. I don't think they like Trump much. Well, Trump tends to threaten Canada a lot, so that doesn't surprise me. Let's go to our members section where Chris Torres asked, can I have a blanket pardon too? I know, right? Like a blanket pardon, preemptive pardon, and pardon into the future, why not? Let's just make things up. That way you commit a crime, you're totally immune from any consequences. Bach says, I was stoked that Trump pardoned Ross Ulbricht. So yes, and Edward Snowden needs to be next. We have a story about that later on in the show, so stick around for that. I agree with his decision in pardoning him. And by the way, that pardon is another example of him following through with a promise that he made to libertarians who booed him when he went to go speak at a libertarian conference. But we'll get to that story a little later in the show. Joe Babcock writes in and says, prices are still too damn high. Yeah, it turns out that inflation isn't something that you can snap your fingers and get rid of. So I'm sure that there's gonna be increasing pressure on Trump to do something about that. And let's see, lots of comments in our Twitch community. Let's start with Targrim Unlimited, who's been subscribed at tier 1 for 57 months. Keep up the great work, TYT. Looks like it's going to be a long 4 years. We Americans are going to need you spreading both sides' truths more than ever. Thank you, I appreciate that. I'm sorry if I sound nasally. I'm not getting over being sick. Like, it's driving me crazy. I've been sick for weeks. It's like a low-level cold situation that's really bad. YTP Renewed says conservatism has forever thrown away any credibility on claiming to be tough on crime. It is over. Anytime a conservative invokes tough on crime rhetoric, point to this day. Anyone who can't see through conservatism's BS. Welcome back to the show, everyone. We have limited time, so I want to get right into our next story.
You saying that California, if they continue to aid and abet law breaking and harbor illegal immigrants, money from DC gets cut off?
Yeah, we're talking about conditions to this disaster.
Congressional Republicans are looking to punish Americans who lost everything in the recent wildfires in Southern California by withholding disaster relief aid unless the state governed exactly the way that they want them to govern. Which puts me in a really difficult situation because, as everyone knows, there is no love lost between me and Gavin Newsom. I have been very critical of the Democratic leadership in this state. They have in fact mismanaged. They have in fact failed to prepare the state for the winds that were coming, the fire weather that we were all warned about a week prior to the devastating wildfires breaking out. But now the congressional Republicans are going beyond the mismanagement issues. Now all of a sudden, I'm hearing them bring up all these other strings that they want to attach to the relief aid. And I just want to remind everyone that our taxes, everyone who works and pays taxes, they are contributing to the federal resources that are supposed to be available if they lose everything as a result of a natural disaster, if they lose everything as a result of fires like the ones that broke out a week and a half ago in Los Angeles. So like the idea that we keep paying our taxes and we can't rely on any federal relief if a natural disaster strikes, just purely based on politics, is infuriating. So look, let's listen to the conversation between Sean Hannity and Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson so you get a sense of what I'm talking about here.
We're talking about conditions to this disaster. Look, there are natural disasters, but there are man-made disasters as well, and they made terrible decisions. You know, they knew exactly what they were doing. That reservoir outside Pacific Palisades, 117 million gallons, it was empty for a year. Why? They were trying to save a smelt fish or something. I mean, their policies are upside down. They made decisions that made that disaster exponentially worse, and this is what the American taxpayer is demanding of us everywhere else in the country.
Okay, there are things he said there that are true, but there's one major thing he said that is not true. He's totally misinformed about, and it's been kind of driving me crazy. The whole issue of, preserving smelt, right? The tiny little fish that they keep referring to, that had no impact on the water supply in Southern California. That is, in my opinion, an issue that needs to be addressed because we have not built water infrastructure to preserve water when it does rain. And it's ridiculous that that's the case when we live in a drought-prone state. So that does impact parts of California, right? The effort to save the smelt fish does impact the water supply in parts of California, but not Southern California. He is correct in noting that the Santa Ynez Reservoir in the Pacific Palisades was empty and had been empty for a year, but it wasn't because of the smelt, okay? It was empty because there was a tear on the floating cover of that reservoir. And it takes forever to fix a damn thing in this state because of environmental regulations, because of other regulations that are intentionally set to prevent the construction of new homes. Because let's keep it real, people want to maintain the value of their homes. And if you build more supply, then that might lower, just for a brief period of time, the value of their home. That really is the center of a lot of the dysfunction that we see in California when it comes to regulations and red tape, preventing us from building things or fixing things. So that is a problem, okay? Bringing up the reservoir, that's fine. Bringing up the mismanagement leading up to the fire, that's fine. I've spoken out against that. So if there's concern that the federal aid is going to be misspent, okay, or mismanaged by our politicians here in California, you could write the legislation or provide that aid, ensuring that the money ends up in the hands of the very people who lost everything as a result of these fires. But that's not the conversation we're having here. In fact, Mike Johnson wants to go further, and so Politico, before I get to Politico, let's take a look at the next video, because here he talks about fire mismanagement, but then he brings up other issues. Let's take a look.
Would conditions be tied to defund, dismantle, no bail laws?
I think all those issues have to be addressed. When you're talking about disaster aid, you don't want to leave the people, who are really hurting without something because of the terrible political choices of their leaders. But we got to thread that needle the right way. But I think that what we're talking about here is restoring common sense, even in the state of California. Right. With the mandate we have, the responsibility we have, we're going to do that very thing.
Okay, so to be fair to Mike Johnson, he's not the one who brought up policies like defund the police or bail reform in California. Sean Hannity did. But to take that credit away from Mike Johnson, he agreed that those are the types of policies that they need to review in order to determine whether or not Californians who have paid into their federal taxes are deserving of disaster relief money. And I think that's unacceptable. I want to be clear that a lot of those policies I'm against. I wasn't against in the beginning, but once you saw the impact of some of those policies and how devastating they've been to cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco, I am against those policies. It doesn't matter, that's a completely separate issue from disaster relief aid. The idea that Democrats would look at a state like North Carolina that suffered from hurricanes and severe weather conditions, people who lost everything in that state. The idea that Democrats would say, we don't like how Republicans are governing that state. And so we are going to hold federal relief money hostage, and we're gonna use that as leverage to get local lawmakers in that state to change their policies on a whole litany of issues that aren't even related to hurricanes or natural disasters. That is insane to me. I would be furious if Democrats did that, and I'm furious right now that Republicans are attempting to do this. And look, Mike Johnson argues, well, what? In other cases, with Hurricane Katrina is a good example. There were strings attached to that disaster relief money. No, there weren't. What is he talking about? Okay, let's get into the details about that, because as far as conditioning relief following Hurricane Katrina goes, the hurricane made landfall on August 29th, 2005. The Senate quickly approved $10.5 billion in aid for the victims on September 1st, 2005. So almost immediately, which was a good thing. That's what you're supposed to do. The House approved the measure the next day without any debate. And then President Bush requested an additional $51.8 billion on September 7th. Congress approved that funding package the next day. When people in America have been devastated by a natural disaster, you need to provide relief, not play politics. These people have lost, in some cases, everything. They've lost their homes, all of their possessions. They're desperately looking for a place to live in a state that has a housing shortage, and we're gonna talk about bail reform? What the hell does bail reform have to do with this? Politico wrote on the 10th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, federal officials estimated that taxpayers had eventually laid out some $120 billion to deal with the after effects of the disaster. About $76 billion of that sum went to Louisiana projects, nearly 3 times the size of the state's annual budget. That's when Congress wasn't entirely broken. When Congress realized, oh, the whole point of the federal government is to protect the people of the United States. Otherwise, what the hell is the point? Why the hell are we paying our taxes? I'm asking a genuine question here. Why the hell are we paying our taxes if that money doesn't go toward the people of this country? Not only to make their lives better, but to rescue them when disaster strikes. Are we just paying our taxes to fund the Pentagon? Are we just paying our taxes to fund wars abroad? I'm being serious. What the hell am I paying my taxes for if I can't rely on the federal government to help the people of California after they've been victimized by devastating wildfires? And again, I want to reiterate, it is true that our Democratic leaders in this state have let us down. They have failed us. So I'm okay with the criticism toward Gavin Newsom or Karen Bass. And if anybody has a problem with attacking them or critiquing them because of their failed leadership, because they happen to be Democrats, kick rocks, because they did mismanage the lead up to these fires. But to punish the people of California, the people of Los Angeles, who have lost everything because you don't like the Democratic politicians who lead the state, I think that's ridiculous. If you want to provide that aid in a way that ensures the money gets into the hands of the actual victims, I'm fine with that. Because I don't really trust Gavin Newsom or Karen Bass either. But to bring up all these other issues, like bail reform and how you don't like that and how you might bring that up and use that as something you want changed in order to release some of the funds for disaster relief, I think that's unacceptable, absolutely unacceptable. There was a brief moment when Republican House Speaker Dennis Hassert, by the way, was questioning whether it was a good idea for American taxpayers to bankroll the rebuilding of New Orleans following Hurricane Katrina. And what happened was really interesting. So that record-breaking federal response wasn't assured when failed federally built levees left 80% of New Orleans underwater. Hassert, the Republican House Speaker at the time, told reporters that it looks like a lot of that place could be bulldozed. When asked whether the federal government should spend billions of dollars to rebuild the city, he said, I don't know, that doesn't make sense to me. But he rightly received a lot of backlash from Americans across the country. Because guess what? Americans wanted to ensure their fellow Americans in New Orleans were made whole after that devastating hurricane hit, after the devastating floods happened. And so as a result, Hassert soon apologized for his remarks. He ultimately joined a bipartisan group of congressional leaders, along with President George W. Bush, in agreeing to support the aid package. Now look, again, California lawmakers dropped the ball. I totally agree. But we cannot condition the aid based on other non-natural disaster issues. And that's exactly what's happening here. While appearing on Meet the Press last weekend, Speaker Johnson was asked about whether Republicans will use the relief funds to leverage Democrats to get on board with other policies. And here you hear them bring up one other issue. Take a look at that.
Yeah, I want to tell you something that California Governor Gavin Newsom wrote recently. He said, quote, there must be no conditions, no strings attached to disaster aid. And yet we know that there's a big conversation happening right now on Capitol Hill about linking disaster aid for California to an increase in the debt limit, which has been a traditionally really thorny issue. Are you and can you commit that California disaster relief won't have strings attached?
No, I won't commit that because we have a serious problem in California.
I don't think Mike Johnson is really concerned about the poor governance in California. I think Mike Johnson sees an opportunity, as do other Republicans in the party, to hold this money hostage, potentially punish Angelenos in order to get some policy wins, including an increase in the debt ceiling. So now we've heard about an increase in the debt ceiling, tying the disaster relief funds to that, tying the disaster relief funds to changes in bail reform policy in California. I mean, come on. And I would caution Republicans who are signing on to this, because if we're gonna set this precedent, I have no doubt in my mind that Democrats will turn around and do the same thing in Congress. And I don't wanna live in that world. I wanna live in a world where we actually take care of one another, understand the importance of backing our fellow Americans in their time of tragedy and when they need us the most. That's what real leaders and real lawmakers who want to be public servants would do. And again, you want to trash Newsom and Bass? I don't care, have at it. But do not add insult to injury and further punish the people of Los Angeles because you don't like the politicians in this state. I think that's unfair, and I think that's the wrong thing to do, especially when we're talking about people who have paid into their taxes and expect the federal government to be there for them when they need the federal government the most. All right, we gotta take a break. When we come back, John Iadarola joins us for the second hour of the show. Don't miss it.
Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. Here at TYT, we understand this. That's why we're not gonna price gouge you or use inflation as an excuse to raise our prices. A TYT membership is not your typical subscription, but basic membership is still just $4.99. So what do you get for that price? For starters, you're getting exclusive programming, unique exclusive designs from Shop TYT, access to a members only chat, giveaways, emojis, and so many other amazing perks. But most importantly, you're helping to make an impact. As a TYT member, you not only help us do the shows every day, but you drive real positive change in the process. In 2017, we helped to start Justice Democrats right here on TYT. That's a group that got a dozen progressives elected into Congress. That's amazing, you did that. Your support also funds TYT's very own investigative reporting. Just recently, our reporters exposed the Fellowship Foundation and pressured lawmakers into boycotting that bigoted event. Isn't that amazing? We raised over $30,000 for Jackson, Mississippi and delivered clean water to thousands of people in need. Our petitions, polls, and community of activists help keep the corruption of Washington in check. That's the impact of what just $4.99 a month from our members can do. And we're just getting started. Positive change doesn't occur overnight, but with your contribution, we can make it happen together. In the bonus episode for the members, we do some inside baseball. We're gonna look at John's desk. Nice little spaceship here. Nerd, but it is kind of look cool. Who has Legos? Oh no. He's taken apart a keyboard. Who has a mouse pad that's this big? He's got a dog with a nose that you can hang something on. You know what this desk screams to me? Nerd. And that's how we like him. We love Johnny Pie. He's got his own personality like everybody does at TYT. Come meet us all in the bonus episodes. TYT.com/team. David Soror.
Dr. Phil.
It's Adam Green drop by.
Charlemagne.
Congressman, great to have you. It's great to be with you, Chang.
Your show is a great thing. You're informing people. A lot of the shows that I live on, you know, my CNN, my MSNBC, and even Fox, and any of the other shows, NPR, they are so quick to decide that they know what this building means today.
The one thing that I hate that politicians do, you know, they talk about the people they should be talking to.
Do they have any idea that they're the establishment and that they're hated, or do they not realize that at all?
People are so deeply in their little universe. I think it's very easy to not really question what you're doing.
Voters have a right to ask questions of any nominee, whether they're independent, Republican, or Democrat.
The system is duopoly that suppresses competition.
How is it the year 2024 and we're still like, maybe they'll talk about paid medical? Like how is that like at one level it's like, good, what we're talking about it now. You're like, it's 2024.
And that's always been the critique, that your critique of us is, well, you guys give good speeches, you put out good tweets, but you're not wielding actual power. Now we're starting to.
Yes. Congratulations on all your success. You guys are everywhere.
It's about a country and a principle, and that's what you and I both work to achieve. And I'm so glad that at least half the battle has now been won.
If you want to go really hear what's going on honestly, you should tune into the Young Turks.
Thanks for doing such a great job. Please keep it up. Hang tough.
Yeah.
That makes me so happy.
Oh, I like making you happy.
I didn't know about
This is
that.
a happy Anna Kasparian.
What's up?
You're welcome, YouTube.
Join the Dragon Squad by becoming a YouTube channel member. Click the join button below or sign up on tyt.com/join to get access to fun emojis, a member-only chat, exclusive shop TYT designs, ad-free watching, and so many other amazing perks. Plus, you get bragging rights for being part of the coolest community on the internet and help us drive real positive change in the world. The Dragon Squad awaits, so join today.
Godzilla's invading the border. See, when Godzilla attacks, then you can shoot to kill. You won't be successful, but you can try.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasparian and John Idarola with you, host of the Damage Report here at TYT Network. John, how you doing?
I'm good. It's been a very long time since we've been at the desk together.
But you suited up. You're ready.
I did. I didn't have pants in the studio, but I put on the jacket. So I think we're probably gonna be okay. If I don't bolt, we're fine.
All right, all right.
I'm not gonna get fined.
Well, before we get to our stories, I did want to read some super chats, and you guys are. Thank you for your generous super chats today. I really appreciate that. Romulus 463 says, I like nature's law as defined by Plato and embraced in the English Enlightenment as I reject the French Enlightenment, which gave birth to the French Revolution, Marxism, fascism, and nihilism, rejecting traditional values. All right, well, I mean, it really speaks to the diversity of our audience, so thank you for writing in. Interesting thing about the French Revolution is how many myths there are about Marie Antoinette. I talked about that during a bonus episode once.
Oh, I don't know much about it.
Did you know that she never said, let them eat cake? And in fact, 2 of the previous queens were accused of saying the same thing when they hadn't.
I assume that far back, none of those people even existed. I think it's all made up at that point, and I defy anyone to prove me otherwise.
They also built like a little village area that looked like, I believe she was from Austria, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, she was Austrian. And they made it look like Austria because she missed home so much. I mean, she was forced to marry the king. She didn't want to marry him. She was like 14 years old.
Look at this Marie Antoinette apologist over here.
I'm not. She liked to go to that little village to like drink and gamble and like, you know, not have to wear like fancy
dresses. Go wild.
Yeah,
okay, you're painting a picture here. I'd watch that movie.
It's just interesting. Read about it. It's really good. Okay. And then we have Hanging with My Prometheus, who says it's laughable coming from a guy who wants to end one genocide and then contribute to another one more heavily. I'm not sure what you're referring to exactly, but I'll read the rest. Trump is very well, could be lying through his teeth. If he manages to end genocide in Ukraine, so could he also in Palestine. So look, to be fair, I mean, there is a very fragile ceasefire in Gaza at the moment, and the pressure coming from Donald Trump's envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, had a lot to do with it. Now, the ceasefire deal that was agreed upon was the ceasefire deal that was drafted by the Biden administration. They had presented it to Israel and Hamas all the way back in the spring of 2024. Obviously, Israel would not sign on to it. And then because of pressure from the Trump side of things, they finally got this fragile ceasefire in place. So look, even Biden gave him credit for that. I know you don't like Trump.
He can do whatever. People keep throwing the word pressure around it. I don't know what was the pressure.
So
to do what?
I'll give you one example. So Witkoff wanted to meet with Netanyahu, and Netanyahu tried to evade the whole situation. He said like, I can't, it's a religious day for Jews and I can't have negotiations on this day. And he basically told him to F off and meet with him, and he did.
Okay, but like, so or what?
I mean,
They're not gonna sell them weapons. Trump is gonna be like, no more weapons for Israel.
Look, I don't understand it because I don't think he would stop the weapons sales to Israel. I think he would continue selling weapons to Israel, but that's not the issue.
I think this is TikTok.
You think TikTok had an influence on Netanyahu?
No, I'm not talking about literally TikTok. I'm saying this is the same thing as the TikTok stunt that was pulled before his inauguration.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
I think it's mutually beneficial coordination I think we can't go into a super long conversation, but I think Netanyahu has plans for the West Bank and Gaza. I think the way Donald Trump is talking about Gaza, if they move in and annex the entire thing, I think he's doing a ceasefire to ease the path a little bit. People's eyes will go away, and then they're going to start colonizing the whole thing.
No, I definitely think.
And I think Donald Trump has told him, look, that's fine, we could do that. I'll build a hotel, or if not, if you want to invade again, I'm already giving you 2,000-pound bombs again.
Okay, yeah, no.
I don't think there's pressure. I think there's coordination.
Coordination might be the case, but there was definitely a deal made. Like I've made that point before. Trump has promised Netanyahu something. And I do think that looking the other way as illegal settlements are getting built is part of that deal. Yeah, and it is devastating. But anyway, I didn't expect to get into a long conversation.
We haven't talked about Gaza in a bit.
Yeah, but no, I definitely think there was some sort of promise made. So we'll see what happens. By the way, I don't think that this ceasefire is going to get past the initial 6-week pause in fighting. I think once Hamas returns all the hostages, the war will go on. That's my prediction. I could be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong about that.
I hope so too.
All right, History Speaks writes in and says, I agree with ending birthright citizenship and don't see it as racist / anti-immigrant. US citizenship shouldn't be earned through birth tourism, but either 1, going through the legal migration process, or 2, being born to an American mom or dad. Look, you end birthright citizenship, which by the way, I think needs to be done through a constitutional convention, considering it's protected by the Constitution. Look, I don't know if the Supreme Court would rule against birthright citizenship, depending on their interpretation of the Constitution. I have no idea, but my point is, if they end birthright citizenship, that does complicate things. Like, do previous people who were born in the country to undocumented parents get grandfathered in? Like, how do you work that out?
It would depend on how it happened. If the Supreme Court, if they challenge Trump's thing, which they will, and it goes all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court's like, we're just right-wing politicians, that's it. Screw the Constitution, doesn't matter. Then it would not apply previously, because the executive order says it starts at a certain date. If they were to pass a constitutional amendment, which is the only actual legal way to do this, then it would depend on how they write it.
Look,
but either way, it's insane.
I remember covering a story about there's this whole cottage industry of Chinese birth tourism, right? I do think it's a problem. I don't know how you solve it. I don't think getting rid of birthright citizenship is the right way to solve it, but yeah.
We've made it this far.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna be okay.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on to stories we actually have prepared and produced for the show today, starting with this.
There are a lot of good billionaires out there that have been with Democrats who share our values, and we will take their money, but we're not taking money from those bad billionaires.
That was Ken Martin, who's one of the candidates to chair the Democratic National Committee, and he says that billionaires are very bad unless they're bribing us, okay, the Democrats. So this is during the Politico Forum, and during the Politico Forum, candidates for the DNC chair reacted to now former President Joe Biden's farewell address, warning about an oligarchy forming in the US. Take a look.
I want to warn the country of some things that give me great concern. This is a dangerous concentration, and that's a dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a very few ultra-wealthy people. The dangerous consequences if their abuse of power is left unchecked. Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead. People should be able to make as much as they can, but play by the same rules, pay their fair share of taxes. So much is at stake.
Is it? That honestly, I covered that video last week, and I'm actually more angry about it today. Oh, is there an oligarchy forming in the United States? Wasn't a problem when you were benefiting from it, but on your way out, you're gonna condemn it, right? Anyway, so Democrats have taking more money from billionaires in this past election cycle than the GOP has, and that's why it's frustrating hearing Biden talk about this now or talk about it on his way out when it's been an issue impacting both political parties for some time now. Harris backed by 8.4 times more dark money than Trump. Super PACs supporting Harris have raised at least $195.8 million from dark money groups this election cycle, while those backing Trump have raised at least $23.2 million, according to a sludge analysis of Federal Election Commission data.
I mean, that may be a small portion of the total money. I'm assuming it's wrong on both sides.
It's dark money, it's the dark money.
Sure, dark money organizations, I guess. If we're talking about billionaire influence, obviously, I mean, they counted like $20 billion for Trump right there. I mean,
Trump has billionaires.
Elon Musk put more than 10 times that himself individually. There are other billionaires that did, and I'm sure Harris also got a lot more than is in those numbers.
Yeah,
but
John, both parties are corrupt as F, okay? Like they're super corrupt, both of them, okay? So Democrats have no leg to stand on this issue, and yes, Republicans are corrupt, they've been corrupt, it's a huge issue. I mean, Donald Trump is surrounded by billionaire tech bros who he's now siding with on policies that he previously was not in favor of.
Yeah.
So that's a problem, that's a huge problem. But anyway, in regard to money in politics overall, not just dark money, Democrats massively outraised Republicans as well. We've talked about that multiple times on the show. The Democrats, their allied super PACs and other groups raised about $2.9 billion versus about $1.8 billion for the Republicans. And looking specifically at billionaires, Forbes noted that 83 billionaires, 2 of which are centrobillionaires who are worth more than $100 billion backed Harris during the 2024 election, compared to the 53 who endorsed Donald Trump. Okay, so that's kind of that's like the field, who's supporting who. You know, when it comes to the dark money donors that jump out on this list, you have, interesting, Rick Caruso, a former Republican, actually contributed heavily to the Harris campaign. So did George Soros, Reid Hoffman, who we talked about. And so it's an issue on both sides. Now, even if these billionaires are considered good, which like what does that mean, right? Like, so you have this.
Yeah, which ones are good and which are bad?
The ones, like that's the whole thing. If you're funding the Democrats, you're considered a good billionaire, according to Ken Martin. Again, a contender to lead the DNC. And Jacobin pointed out that 2 of Harris's biggest donors, Bill Gates and Airbnb founder Joe Gebbia, recently turned on the Democratic Party and are now very much in favor of Donald Trump. So Bill Gates stated after a visit to Mar-a-Lago, I felt like Trump was, energized and looking forward to helping to drive innovation. I was frankly impressed with how well he showed a lot of interest in the issues I brought up. These people don't have any values. These people want cookies from the politicians in power. There's a Republican in power, they will kiss the ring because they want the cookies.
100%.
That's all this is. It's gross.
Yeah, that was funny. It's also deeply embarrassing for Bill Gates. In particular, Bill Gates is a guy who I'm sure he thinks of himself as a good billionaire or whatever. He's done some good things around the world or whatever. I don't personally think a good billionaire is even possible. I think they're, at best case scenario, lesser evil billionaires. But I also love the way he talked about Trump there. Was like he met with like an unruly kid and he was like, he was energized this time and he showed interest in what I was talking about. Like that's how he talked about the most powerful person in the world.
Yeah, if you're kissing his ass because you want favorable policies from the Trump administration, he's gonna listen. He likes to have his ass kissed.
Yeah,
like he's a ham. Like the one thing I'll say about Trump, I have a lot of things to say about Trump, but he's the biggest ham of all time. Like he wants, it is true. Like he wants people to adore him. He craves it, he wants it. So if you're being complimentary to him, of course he's gonna be engaged. You're complimenting him. But look, I see the whole good versus bad billionaire thing as bad framing because it's not about their morality, okay? It's about appealing to power to get, favors in return. So yeah, Democrats, the billionaires are gonna suck up to you if you guys are in power. That doesn't mean they're good, it doesn't mean they're bad, it means they're looking out for their best interests. So I just think it's ridiculous to hear this from Ken Martin. What do you think about this whole DNC leadership fight?
I honestly, I've been too caught up in all the other insanity that's going on to really follow it too much. So I can't necessarily say who I would go for at this point. I can name at least one person who I don't want in charge based on this segment. But yeah, we'll see. I'm worried. I mean, look, we were hoping coming out of the election that the Democrats would show at least some sign of learning literally anything. And they kept all their same leadership in Congress. Nothing bad had happened, no mistakes, keep them all. Like that shows they didn't want to learn a lesson. They're immediately talking about Harris running again next time. It's like, I guess that's could be slightly different.
Oh my God.
If they go with the same sort of DNC person, it is going to be deeply upsetting. But we also know that they're going to.
Are they really considering Kamala again?
No, I mean, it's so far out that who the hell knows. But there were some people saying, and look, when you poll people, she's one of the top Democrats, but that's because people know who she is.
Name recognition.
People know, and a lot of people liked her. Admittedly, a lot of people liked her and were enthusiastic, and they feel. I think not enough, clearly, but I think a lot of Democrats still feel burned. We'll see what they think about her in 2 or 3 years.
All right.
Of course, by then maybe she'll be California governor. I don't know.
All right, we're gonna take a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about Donald Trump's big announcement in regard to AI. Sean Wilhelm writes in our members section and says 1,443 days and 6 hours. And thank you to our producer Taylor, who clarified what was meant by that comment.
Yeah.
So this is the countdown till 2029.
You know the thing we have in the background?
Oh, you have a countdown too?
That's a different countdown. That's how many shows we have to do until the next presidential election. It's only 959. It's really racing by.
I wish I had a better sense of my retirement date so I can do that countdown. That's what I'm more interested in.
I'm getting a pretty good idea of my expiration date. I think it's sooner than 959, actually.
Anyway, Sean, thank you for writing in. Fat Sater, thank you for the 10 TYT memberships. Same to Woman AF, who gifted 10 TYT memberships as well. Ishanti, who has a beautiful name, says hello to all. Hello to everyone's dog. Just watch Cenk on Don Lemon. Well, if any of you are thinking about clicking out of this window to go watch Cenk, don't do that, okay? You can go watch that later, okay?
Or not at all.
It's a VOD, as the cool kids call it, video on demand, VOD.
Yeah, they never stop saying that.
They call it VOD to save time, so they don't have to say the whole thing.
And kids are always running up to me in the mall saying skibbity VOD constantly.
By the way, our cha-cha dance instructor is a very young guy. He's like 19, he just turned 19. And so I was like, oh, I know what Riz means. And then I proceeded to tell him what I think it means, and he said it was wrong. He says it only applies to men, not women, which I don't think is true.
I guess that's the only examples I've heard. I wouldn't have limited it in that way.
What, a woman can't have Riz? I think I have
oddly
Riz.
Conservative, I don't know.
Well, he is Armenian, so Armenians tend to be more conservative. All right, Timothy Pullman says, Ryan Grimm is a real one. Indeed he is. Boone Dragon says, California citizens should put their federal taxes in escrow account and not send them into federal coffers. Nobody gets your tax money until government folds. Boone Dragon, I would love to suggest doing that, except for the fact that I feel like these people would probably be targeted by the IRS, and I don't want them to suffer consequences for doing that. But it does infuriate me that we are paying into federal taxes, and then once we need the federal government because of these devastating fires, they're trying to apply all of these conditions that have nothing to do with fire management whatsoever.
Yep.
It's really disturbing, it is.
Yeah.
New England Dragon says, love the damage report, hence my name. All right, there you have it. Let's go to Killa, who says, again, Anna, You are giving these right-wing voters too much credit. They don't care about the donor class. I'm sure many of them are fully aware. They just hate minorities so much that they are willing to take the red and white, blue. I'm not gonna read that because it's vulgar and we're not allowed to say it. I disagree with you. I think that there is a faction of Republican voters who hate corruption and have hated corruption for a long time. Let's get back to the show. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to TYT. Anna and John with you. Let's talk a little bit about what Trump is planning for the future of AI in America.
It's my honor to welcome 3 of the world's leading technology CEOs. And in the case of Larry Ellison, it's well beyond technology, sort of CEO of everything. But to announce the largest AI infrastructure project by far in history, and it's all taking place right here in America.
A very enthusiastic Donald Trump has announced the Stargate AI infrastructure project. Now, what is that? Well, his new right-hand man, Elon Musk, has poured cold water on it. So before we get to Elon Musk's jabs, which I thought were fascinating, let's get to some of the details about what Stargate is and what Trump is planning. So the Stargate AI infrastructure project is apparently a team effort that involves 3 separate companies and investments in AI infrastructure by the 3 separate companies. So each of their CEOs were actually present during Donald Trump's press conference announcing this. And they include OpenAI CEO Sam Altman, SoftBank CEO Masayoshi Son, and Oracle chairman Larry Ellison. Now, as part of this project, the 3 companies intend to invest $100 billion to power the physical and virtual infrastructure of AI. And to be sure, AI is going to require quite a bit of energy. Okay, so the investment into Stargate is supposed to potentially increase to $500 billion in the coming years. And I want to be clear, based on the way this was announced and based on the reporting of this project, the money isn't gonna come from taxpayers. These are investments that these separate companies are supposed to make into AI infrastructure in the country. So initially that investment will be used to build they're gonna build a 1 million square foot data center in Texas, but it's really not clear what comes after that. So some of the details are sparse, but here's what we do know so far. The project is expected to create 100,000 US jobs, according to Trump. That's what he's claiming. AI technology does need a massive amount of resources in order to function, particularly when it comes to energy. So according to a report that just came out by the Department of Energy, in 2023, US data center energy use accounted for 176 terawatt hours, 4.4% of all total electricity consumption nationwide, or more than the total amount consumed by all households in California. That is insane, okay? But there's more. By 2028, according to the same report, scientists estimate that power center energy use will be between 325 and 580 terawatt hours per year, roughly 6.7 to 12% of all US electricity consumption, or the amount that 30 to 53 million households currently use. And this might be an issue for Americans when it comes to their own personal electric bills, because a November study from the Jack Kemp Foundation, a public policy nonprofit, found electric bills could increase by up to 70% due to AI data center energy demands. And they do require large amounts of water for cooling and other purposes. So in 2014, data centers indirectly used more than 5.6 billion gallons of water for cooling and other energy purposes. According to the new Energy Department report, that indirect water footprint swelled to more than 211 billion gallons in 2023, more water than 1.76 million US households use per year. I can already see your head exploding in regard to this, especially because I'm sure you're thinking about the climate-related ramifications.
Yeah, and so look, it's complicated because as you pointed out, the government has very little to do with any of this, which is why I sort of felt it was weird that it's like this big, like Fox News, like Trump announced, and like so I was like, oh well, look, I have a lot of issues with AI and everything, but I guess it's a big investment, it's a big infrastructure thing, and we've been like begging him to do something with infrastructure his whole time he was president, and so like I was digging into it, and I was like, well, we're not putting any money into it, which I guess is good, theoretically. The only government involvement is he says he's going to try to ease regulations to help them set up the infrastructure in different states.
Right.
Which I guess is something, but like we don't have much to do with this. Which also means that if we think this is a bad idea, it's not like Trump is unilaterally doing it. They're just building a big thing. They were gonna do that anyway. And so they were probably gonna do it under Biden. That said, you could regulate this sort of thing if you thought it was going to wreck the nation's energy costs and everything. That's terrible. You could regulate that. You could do something about the water, certainly about the emissions. Obviously, those are not going to be concerns under Donald Trump. Maybe they wouldn't have been under Biden either. He wanted, or like he put out that memo warning against AI and stuff like that. But in terms of the emissions, Trump isn't going to do literally anything to limit that. I doubt he's gonna care about the energy costs.
I mean,
and it's gonna be affecting Texas the most initially, so conservative Texans' energy costs are probably gonna go up significantly.
Look, I do see the development of AI, and there is a race between the United States and China to dominate AI, right? And so that competition is very much front and center in regard to what Donald Trump is thinking and how he wants to help facilitate the development, future development of AI in America. But obviously, I do see that tension between the energy required for AI, the computing required for AI to work effectively, and what is happening to our environment and what climate goals entail. Now, the fact of the matter is, like, China is gonna compete with us and they're not gonna worry about climate change at all in the process. And so that's frustrating. But I think that you could also generate clean electricity and develop AI without really sacrificing anything as it pertains to climate change, right? So like we've talked a little bit about nuclear energy, and I really do think that that's a possible solution. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's good that you bring that up. I mean, look, China obviously has used a lot of coal.
Yeah.
They probably will for some time, but they also are doing everything they can to lead in clean energy production, solar panels and all that. And we know that Donald Trump has this bizarre ideological opposition to clean energy, probably because of the donors, the fossil fuels and all that. But among the many other executive orders that he did in his first suite was trying to dial back our investment, like the EV tax credits. He's going to hamstring American automakers in terms of catching up with China in building EVs. It's gonna be devastating to a lot of people, a lot of conservatives as well that work in that industry. And also he wants to do everything he can to stop solar and wind power from being developed. When we need that more than ever now, if you're gonna be doing these massive, like you could say, we'll allow you to build these data centers, but you also have to invest in enough clean energy generation to offset a significant percentage of what you're taking up, so that it's not costing. But you could do that, and then maybe while we're leading the way in AI, we could also be leading the way in clean energy. And that would be good for industry, and it would generate jobs. But this is one of the issues, and there's not a lot of areas, not a lot of them for Donald Trump, where it could do all of those things. It could economically be great, but he just has this tiny weird little problem with it that won't let him see past it, even though he's buddies with Elon Musk.
Well, let's get to Elon Musk, because that's where the story gets super juicy. Now, before we talk about this little tiff that Elon Musk has with Altman, which is really at the center of the jabs that Musk is taking here, I just want to note that the cash is talking. Okay, when it comes to Donald Trump and his willingness to play ball with, the tech CEOs who are really trying to build out the energy centers in order to pursue AI. OpenAI spent $1.76 million on government lobbying in 2024 and $510,000 in the last 3 months of the year alone, according to a new disclosure filed on January 22nd, a significant jump from 2023 when the company spent just $260,000 on Capitol Hill. So anyway, I just wanted to give you those numbers because that's how the sausage is really made in government. That's what persuades politicians to play ball with industry. And so that's definitely taking place as it pertains to Donald Trump and the AI industry. Now, let's get back to Elon Musk and Altman, because Musk absolutely did rain on the Stargate parade almost immediately. In response to a post from OpenAI announcing the project, Musk wrote this: "They don't actually have the money." Okay. In response to that, Sam Altman, who is in a bit of a feud with Elon Musk, says, "I genuinely respect your accomplishments and think you are the most inspiring entrepreneur of our time."
Gross.
I think he was being sarcastic. I doubt that he was being serious.
Oh, I thought he was trying to be a diplomat. I feel like he's done that before with him, but you could be right. I don't know him.
Yeah, there's real tension between the two. So Musk posted another statement that reads, "SoftBank has well under $10 billion secured. I have that on good authority." Okay, and Sam Altman disagreed with that, saying, "Wrong, as you surely know. Want to come visit the first site already underway. This is great for the country. I realize what is great for the country isn't always what's optimal for your companies, but in your new role, I hope you'll mostly put America first." So look, it is worth noting that Elon Musk and Altman have feuded for some time now. In fact, Musk has sued Altman and did so last year. So Musk was a co-founder of OpenAI, which was originally a nonprofit. Musk claims that he has issues now because it went from being a nonprofit to being a hybrid, like using a hybrid model. So it's a for-profit, nonprofit hybrid. The for-profit subsidiary of OpenAI is fully controlled by the nonprofit part of OpenAI, and the company's board is still that of a nonprofit. Elon Musk's lawsuit, though, claims that Altman assured Musk that the nonprofit structure guaranteed neutrality and a focus on safety and openness for the benefit of humanity, not shareholder value. But as it turns out, this was all hot air philanthropy, the hook for Altman's long con. Okay, but then get a load of these people. Musk alleges that OpenAI abandoned its principles when it entered into its multi-billion-dollar partnership with Microsoft. And so he left OpenAI's board back in 2018 prior to the company's partnership with Microsoft. But then Musk went on to make his own AI company called xAI, which is for profit.
But cooler because there's an X in it.
True.
Or sexier, I can't tell which he's trying to go for, probably both.
It'll make all the difference, yeah. It sounds like Musk is a little salty here.
Yeah, 100%, and he always has been. And so that's the weird thing about him being like kind of, he's in the shadow cabinet, is that like theoretically he wants to work with Trump, but he also obviously cares a million times more about his own companies. And so Trump just wants to have this day where he's standing with tech billionaires and they're mostly doing their own thing, but he's not stopping it, I guess. So he gets some of the credit. And then Elon Musk comes in and torpedoes it in the same way that Donald Trump just wanted to get inaugurated and Musk decided, no, this is about me, I'm gonna zig heil on the stage. Screw you, buddy, this is my day. And how many times do you get to do that before Donald Trump is done with you? And so, do they have the money? I don't know, maybe they don't. Maybe Musk is right, or maybe Musk is doing what he constantly does on Twitter, which is say whatever he has to say, whether it's a lie or not, to prop up stock price of his company. He's done that many times before, illegally done that before and not gotten any trouble because he's wealthy and well connected. And so I don't know whether to trust any of these numbers that are being thrown around. Some of them sound pretty good, if setting up these data centers produces 100,000 jobs rather than just taking all of our jobs with the AI that they generate, which is the long con that they're doing, then that would be great. But will it? Or is it like how when they build a pipeline, it takes a lot of jobs, and then once it's built, it's 30 people. It's like a Denny's staff that runs the thing. I don't think of data centers as being a super labor-intensive industry in an ongoing way. And also, they didn't even say that. Trump said that. Well, remember when Trump got in office the last time, he was like, I'm gonna do all this stuff, get all these businesses back, this air conditioning company's gonna build the plane. They didn't do any of that. He just says it. He's got that in common with Elon Musk. They know they can say whatever they want, it'll make headlines, and then if it doesn't happen, whatever, that's 1,000 Hitler salutes ago. We don't even remember that anymore. And so some of it sounds good, but I don't know who to trust, either on the political side or on the CEO side.
Oh man, that is a difficult game to play, right? But what we want to know is what you think. So we have a poll about this. Are you Team Musk or Team Altman? Answer. And when we come back from the break, we'll get into what you guys think about this. Let's take a break. What's up, everyone? Welcome to our final social break of the day. Simon Moody writes in and says, I have to say, I only had it at 50-50 that the police unions would make a fuss over Donald Trump's pardons, sweeping pardons of the January 6 rioters. So calling this a win, sort of. I did not expect the police unions to condemn what Trump did. I didn't. And I'm really happy that they did. That was the right thing to do. And I think it's important for them to be consistent on this matter. We shouldn't ever make excuses for people who commit acts of violence against police officers, period. Rage Rock for Now says, then why did JD Vance even bother suggesting they'd review the cases individually? What a clown. Yeah, I think he just wanted to not look bad, because it does look bad if you just do sweeping pardons that include people who assaulted police officers. Javier writes in and says, do Republican Californians who lost a house support conditions? I'm gonna go ahead and say they probably don't. And by the way, I think that House Republicans, congressional Republicans who want to condition the disaster relief money are really hurting themselves, because there had been increasing support for the Republican Party in the state of California. Los Angeles in particular, swung 11 percentage points toward Republicans in this past election. So if they want to undo the progress they've made, have at it. But I think they have in their heads that everyone in California is like a pink-haired, Republican-hating communist, and that's just not true. And even if that were the case, you are still tasked with serving the American people, including those you don't agree with, especially those who have paid into their taxes and have funded, disaster relief efforts. Anyway, welcome to our new members, Sea Girl Thrift and Beatrice Ponce. We appreciate you guys. Thank you for being members. We're gonna have a bonus episode for our members today after the main show, and it's gonna be a lot of fun. Definitely check that out. Going back to our Twitch community, Targrim Unlimited says, what happened to the claim of being the party of fiscal responsibility? If they are so perfect with money, why would they need to expand the debt ceiling? Look, you need to increase the debt ceiling literally every year, because the cost of borrowing goes up and all that.
Interest.
Yeah, the interest rate associated with the debt. If we don't pay back our if we don't pay back our debts, that's gonna be a disaster for not just the American economy, the entire global economy. So it's not really about fiscal conservatism, it's just about the cost of paying back our debts every year, and it does have to be increased every year as a result. This is something that Democrats have always wanted to do permanently, but now Trump wants to do it, they're using the issue as leverage. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the show. Just want to read super chats as quickly as I can before we get to our last story. Frank Thorne writes in and says, 62 and still have to work. That is devastating, but that is true of so many Americans right now.
And they want to raise.
I know they want to raise the retirement age. I know. The stinky stocking full of lies, not good politics, terrible politics. Working till the day you die is not preferred. I'll just put it that way. The stinky stocking full of lies says, buckle up, it's gonna be a bumpy 4 years. Romulus says over 44,000 hours of video evidence was withheld from the defense counsel over January 6 cases as people were convicted. Only one of the misbehaviors of the DOJ. There's also a lot of video showing individuals assaulting police officers, including one guy who stole a baton from a cop and then proceeded to beat that cop and other cops with the baton.
I've never seen any evidence of that. And I watched a lot of Tucker Carlson, so.
And by the way, that guy pleaded guilty because the evidence was so overwhelming. I don't think people like that should have been pardoned, but that's just me. How Blair you says, I once saw an old lady trip and fall and I didn't help her up because she's a Republican. I'm just following Mike Johnson's logic on aid after disasters. I do not help people unless we agree. So he's being sarcastic.
I ask for a buck and then I'll lift him up.
Yeah, look, just be a decent human being, okay? When people are desperate, conditioning aid is kind of a sick thing to do.
Yep.
All right, let's talk a little bit about something Trump did that I definitely agree with, and it's a pardon of all things. Let's get into the details.
If you vote for me on day one, I will commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht, who was sentenced of time served. He's already served 11 years. We're going to get him home. We're going to get him home.
Well, it turns out that Donald Trump definitely kept his word to libertarians. What you just watched was part of his speech at a libertarian conference during the 2024 presidential election. And now he has decided to officially pardon Ross Ulbricht, who is the founder or was the founder of Silk Road, an online, platform in the black market. Now, if you don't know what the Silk Road is or who Ross Ulbricht is, we actually covered this story back when it broke many years ago, 11 years ago. But just to give you some more details about that, Ulbricht, who was known online by the pseudonym Dead Pirate Roberts, a reference to the character in the 1987 movie The Princess Bride, created Silk Road in 2011. He operated the website until it was shut down by law enforcement authorities in 2013. So he did not use this platform to sell drugs or do anything illegal, but the platform was used for illegal activity, and the currency used was Bitcoin, right? In fact, it was the only black market site that relied on Bitcoin in order to fund transactions and things like that. And so in its 2-year lifespan, Silk Road was used by more than 100,000 users. $214 million worth of illegal drugs and illicit services were bought and sold on the platform, which is how Ulbricht became a target by law enforcement. And so prosecutors argued that multiple people died due to drug use that was, drugs that were sold on Silk Road. And there were also allegations that there were murder solicitations of those who posed a threat to Ulbricht, although it's important to note that there was no evidence that any murders were actually carried out. Ulbricht was sentenced to life in prison in 2015 after being convicted on 7 counts, including conspiracy and money laundering related to the anonymous marketplace website he created that was used to sell drugs and illegal goods. According to Ulbricht, the Silk Road was not made to seek financial gain, but he believed that people should have the right to buy and sell whatever they wanted as long as they weren't hurting anyone else. And at the time, now former US District Judge Catherine Forrest said in sentencing him, again, life in prison, that was the sentence. What you did was unprecedented, and in breaking that ground as the first person, you sit here as the defendant having to pay the consequences for that. And so as you saw in the first video we showed, Trump promised that he would pardon Ulbricht and actually followed through on that promise. So he said in announcing the pardon, "I just called the mother of Ross William Ulbricht to let her know that in honor of her and the libertarian movement, which supported me so strongly, it was my pleasure to have just signed a full and unconditional pardon of her son Ross." Then he followed that with, "The scum that worked to convict him were some of the same lunatics who were involved in the modern day weaponization of government against me." Were they? Anyway, he continues, he was given, this is true by the way, this part. He was given 2 life sentences plus 40 years, ridiculous. And that last part I agree with. Look, I think that the life sentence was insane. And so I'm actually happy that Trump pardoned him. That was very heavy-handed.
I mean, look, obviously we don't think the selling of drugs for the most part is, I mean, I don't know where you cap out in terms of which drugs, and you could sell potentially anything on here. It wasn't like a marijuana dealership or whatever. But you could sell guns as well, and you know, there was allegations of human trafficking and the hiring of hitmen, and you could sell anything. And the issue was it's anonymous, and they're specifically using Bitcoin, which is also basically untraceable.
Right.
So he was setting up kind of the perfect place for contraband, black market, illegal goods to, and so we don't know exactly what could have been done with the weapons that were sold on there. We don't know. I don't think the drug stuff is all that serious. I mean, I probably don't want it being on the dark web. I would prefer that it's a storefront. That seems safer for everyone involved. But I know that Donald Trump thinks it's serious. He has repeatedly over and over and over and over and over said that the way that you deal with drug dealers is you shoot them in the head.
Okay, this is the interesting part of this story, okay? So look, I agree with the pardon. That's not as interesting as just how transactional Trump is, okay? So Trump goes to the Libertarian conference. If you remember that, he was booed. Like, libertarians don't necessarily like or favor Trump.
Yeah.
But he made that promise during that conference. And since he got sizable support from libertarian voters in this past election cycle, he followed through on his promise.
Yeah.
He doesn't have any real principles, and that's both a bad thing but also potentially a good thing. So if you're willing to make a deal with Trump, he will at least attempt to carry out a policy or a pardon that you want.
Maybe. Yeah, and so when I saw this, because I like vaguely remembered Silk Road, it was a long time ago and I don't super remember. So I was like, oh, I assume this is like a, like a Snowden thing or something, right? Like he didn't actually do it, the government made it up, or like, and so like I looked into it and I was like, no, he did it. Like the libertarians, like I thought it was like how, Snowden's got people who to this day are like, free him or free, other people that have, whistle blew or whatever. But like, so it's like a principled thing where they never should have been locked up. They didn't actually commit a crime, but he did. Like, he just did. This would be like if, I don't know, my go-to comparison would be like if Harris like needed, some support. So she was like, oh, there's this person who like killed a cop at a BLM riot. So I'm like, oh, I'll let him free, I guess, or whatever, and then do that. Although that is now in vogue with Donald Trump. But it's exactly like that. He broke the law, we know he did, and he's just letting him out in exchange for political support. That's it. Even going against his often cited thing where we should kill drug dealers because what they're doing is so serious. And like, I was almost like maybe Trump is being principled here. But this is just, Donald Trump, you could say, he has no principles, that's part of it. I also think he's proving in the first days of his presidency, he's a criminal's best friend. Law and order's done. It's a transactional lawless society. It's personalities, it's not actual laws, it's not an actual constitution. He's a criminal's best friend, he's violent criminal's best friend, he's attempted murderer's best friends. That's what he is. You can rely on him. If you commit the right sorts of crimes, the right sorts of beatings and murders and all that, then he will have your back.
Look, I have no problem with the website being shut down. The website was facilitating illegal activity, including activity that very likely got people hurt, okay? So I'm not at all justifying that. But I do have a problem with someone getting a life sentence in prison for simply having a website that facilitates the behavior that other people are engaging in. Especially when you consider the fact that like, did the Sackler family get a life sentence?
Oh, well, you don't have to convince me that they should have a life sentence.
Like how many hundreds of thousands of Americans have died from opioid overdoses because of the Sacklers?
Oh yeah, no, they did worse.
So like, Our justice system is pretty gross because there are moneyed interests that get away with murder, literally. And then this guy, who really didn't have any power, did get caught, as the person who was running this website. And should he have been punished to some extent? Sure, but a life sentence? Insane.
Yeah, I have no idea. My fear here is there's the transactional thing of giving a political group back what they want. I'm also worried about going forward, the transactional thing of this guy potentially has maybe a fortune of Bitcoin waiting for him now that he's out there. Maybe. Donald Trump now has his own thing where untraceable massive sums of money can be transferred to him. 80% of it goes to him. We have no idea. This guy could give him $300 million for all we know. Like, maybe they talked beforehand. But that's the era we live in, I don't know.
Isn't that the American way?
It is now the American way, yes, and I find that deeply worrying.
Well, it is refreshing to see some instances of a politician actually following through with his promise. I wish we had that on the Democratic side, but we don't, so.
Free our prisoners.
Oh no, Democrats are really good at freeing the prisoners. Like they excel at that.
Yeah, imagine if the next one, like AOC needs youth voters. She's like, oh, Luigi? Yeah, no, he's out. Whatever, it doesn't matter. You vote for me, and you did, so I let him out.
Yeah.
That's what this is.
Yeah.
The AOC, I just gave you an idea.
Think about it.
You want to win that primary?
Anyway, all right, well, bonus episode is next for our members. Check it out because we have a lot more to talk about, including Bernie Sanders burning CNN right to their faces. TYT.com/join, we'll see you there.